Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of the possible evidence that could be introduced in the Chad Guy Daybell trial. And of course, even though Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty of all the charges against her, Chad is still considered to be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. It's important to watch the first 2 parts of this series, so if you haven't watched those yet, just pause it and come back to us because I'm just going to keep going right along in the timeline. We left off talking about the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux, which was coming up, and although this is in a different jurisdiction, it was brought up at Lori's trial. It's likely to be brought up at Chad's trial, how they involved themselves in the marriage/divorce of Brandon and Melanie, and talking about things that the restraining orders between Brandon and Melanie, and trying to help Melanie get the kids from Brandon, how Alex sits like a spider out there when she's trying to get the kids after Brandon ends up doing a runner, and how Brandon's deemed dark by Chad and trying to break down evil spirits out of Melanie's kids and the like. So it's the same sort of, in my opinion, cult-like behavior that's seen, but Brandon got lucky. And just a reminder that on July 19th, Melanie had texted Lori that, it might be a good idea for Lori to take out life insurance on JJ and Tylee. So let's talk about the shooting, the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. Here is his wife, Melanie Boudreaux, later Pulowski. Melanie Gibb testified at Lori's trial that Chad Daybell was present for at least one casting. I liken them to exorcisms. And as that casting was after Tylee's murder, that casting was likely for Brandon Boudreaux. On September 30th, the user of the Lollytime account, that's Lori, searched for the word possessed and how to remove the rear seat of my Jeep Wrangler. The account then accessed a YouTube video showing how to remove the rear seat, and it's believed that the group removed the rear seat and tire from the Jeep Wrangler in order to best use the vehicle in what I could call drive-bys. Ring footage and witnesses recorded a Jeep idling for at least 1.5 hours before the attack on Brandon. And at the time of the shooting, if Brandon had been murdered, Melanie would have received $200,000 in life insurance. Here's a picture of Tylee's Jeep used in the crime, and keep in mind that Tylee was deceased at this point and already in Chad Daybell's backyard. September 25th, Alex Cox was confirmed to be in possession of, it says Charles's, but it was Tylee's Jeep Wrangler in Rexburg, Idaho. Alex took the Jeep to Dan's window tinting and had the front windows tinted 20% and the rear windows tinted to 5%. So to darken the windows. This is from the case file. Between October 2018 and October 2019, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell identified Brandon Boudreaux as a dark soul. Lori had extensive communication with Melanie Lee Boudreaux Pulowski, which resulted in Melanie and Brandon's separation and divorce. On September 17th, Brandon provided Melanie with his new rental address by her request. That address was known to few people. Only Melanie had relations with the offenders. And then there's some dates that she visited them in Idaho. She flew back to Arizona on the 29th of September. Between the 25th and the 30th, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow, and Chad prepared for Brandon's murder. Some of those preparations involved the Jeep Wrangler's window tinting, the removal of the Jeep's back seat, the removal of the Jeep's back wheel, the rental of a storage unit where the Jeep's wheel and seat were stored, Alex going to the shooting range, and use of throwaway phones by Chad and Alex. On the evening of September 30th, Alex drove the Jeep from Rexburg, Idaho, and arrived near Gilbert, Arizona on October 1st at approximately 1930 hours. And then the attack on Brandon Boudreaux. He goes out to the gym, he comes back, he's in his Tesla, and he's shot at through the door. It misses him, it breaks the window. He calls the police. Says here, on October 2nd, Brandon reported that someone shot at him when he was arriving home while he was exiting his vehicle in front of his Gilbert residence. He indicated that the shot was fired from the back of a Jeep Wrangler parked down the street from his residence. Brandon suspected that the shooter was possibly Alex Cox. Bingo! Brandon further reported that Lori Vallow was to blame for his impending divorce from his wife, Melanie, the niece to Lori. Brandon then provided the authorities with insight into the extreme religious beliefs of Lori and Alex. Brandon suspected that these beliefs led him to lose his wife and also led to the murder of Charles Vallow. The police questioned Brandon about the shooting. Of course, this is a different jurisdiction, so he has to, explain everything to him. If you want to stop and read the whole back story, the first paragraph explains that, kind of like what we've been talking about through this whole series, how he tries to explain this to the police. And basically, he tells them that Melanie was still on his life insurance policy and would receive approximately $200,000 if he was to die. Furthermore, Brandon already paid her a goodly amount in their divorce thus far. So what was Lori doing while Alex was shooting at Brandon? Well, on 10/2, usually Lori is going to get out of Dodge when there's a murder going on so that she has plausible deniability. But the Lori First Style account had multiple deleted cookies for Arizona media outlets. She was in Idaho, but she was searching for the news of Brandon Boudreaux shooting. So she's looking to see if his shooting has made the news yet. It's insane, isn't it? 2 days later, October 4th, Chad up and urges his wife Tammy to visit her family in Utah alone, without him, which is unusual. And meanwhile, the day before, October 3rd, Chad wrote to Lori that he was so excited to be going on a date with her. So he got his wife out of town so he could go on a date with his mistress. And then on October 5th, 2019, Chad texted, the short version is that she has been switched. Tammy is in limbo, and a level 3 demonic entity named Viola is in her body. Now, on a side note, what demonic entity is ever going to be named Viola? I mean, that's like an old lady knitting by the fire with a bonnet on's name. I mean, this guy is just the biggest dork and dummy. But, okay, sorry. It happened about 10 p.m. and was done by Tammy's sister, Sam, who I always knew was 3D, but turns out she is multiple creation. And then he writes, Viola has been attached for about a year to my niece, who is Sam's 12-year-old daughter. I've connected with Tammy in limbo, and she is very frustrated and upset. She wants Viola removed as soon as possible. Viola seems to be similar to Penelope, another name, Penelope. And if there's anybody named Penelope, I don't mean to offend. These are old school names. The personality differences from Tammy should be evident quickly. Please seek a confirmation on this, but I have now checked 3 times since I got home. So he's been off with Lori having his storm pulled, and now he gets home and he is just checking on his wife, right? Trying to use religious justifications to have her murdered. And then more obvious premeditation. Not fully sure of the timing for removal, but once her actions verify the differences, I don't want to wait. And you will see, out of habit, Lori tends to get out of Dodge when something's going on. So on the 8th of October, she flies from Idaho to Phoenix under the name Lori Ryan. And then you have the attempted murder of Tammy Daybell. But first, Chad made sure to secure the bag, like they had learned with Charles. Chad went in with Tammy to sign the upped life insurance policy she got from work. When she was initially hired, she just took the $10,000 minimum amount, but they upped it to 5 times her salary, so the total was $130,000. There was also an additional insurance policy already in effect that wasn't through the school for $300,000 that didn't need any kind of changing. So just to reiterate, Chad was blaming Tammy's darkness on her sister Samantha. And one of the reasons he didn't like Samantha is because she didn't read his books, and he said she was very much like Brandon. And then the state had listed some overt acts, just to reiterate, the text messages between Chad and Lori regarding the death percentages for Tammy. This was back in July 30th. Chad getting a burner phone, September 18th. Alex Cox getting a burner phone, October 9th. Text messages, which I just show you, about Tammy being in limbo and possessed by a spirit named Viola, from Chad to Lori. Then September 8th, Chad essentially getting Tammy to up her life insurance policy. And then the next day, Alex Cox attempts to shoot Tammy. On October 8th, Alex Cox conducts multiple internet searches, including searches related to Grendel drop and shooting through a Dodge Dakota. Take note that that's the kind of car that the Daybells drove. So perhaps it's thought that he was thinking of maybe just shooting through the car like he did at Brandon's Tesla. He also spends a lot of time at the gun range in the months before and shooting from different distances. And I think and I'm not a gun nut, but I think they match that up with the kind of gun and the kind of distance he would have shot at, say, Brandon and Tammy, to try to say, oh, he took this lane because it was this kind of gun with this kind of a distance. And then Alex traveled from the Sportsman's Warehouse to the vicinity of the Daybell residence on October 9th, 2019. So let's look at the cast data trail these dum-dums left. October 9th, it's the day of the attempt on Tammy. At 9:57, Chad texts Lori, "Gotta stop by the store right now to get that other number working. Hopefully it won't take long." That's a burner phone he's talking about. 10:26, Chad texted Lori, "I will call right now from a 401 number." 10:27, Chad calls Lori from the 401 number. I mean, might as well just put a clown hat on these folks, right? I mean, how dangerous would they be if they were smart? Let's look at the trail Alex left from the cast data. 2:42 p.m. User Homer J. Maximus, that's Alex, drives towards Idaho Falls. 3:17, he's at the Sportsman's Warehouse. 4:47, he's near the Daybell home. 4:56, he's at the Daybell residence. And that's when Tammy's assaulted by a masked man with what she assumed was a paintball gun. Let's go in deeper with that cast analysis. At 4:12, at the Sportsman's Warehouse, Alex purchases bullfrog black rain pants, black gloves, camo beanie, black ski mask, and a soft drink. Sociopath's gotta stay hydrated now. Don't forget it. 4:12, he leaves the Sportsman's Warehouse. 4:50 to 5:03, he's located near the Daybell residence. He apparently made a pass by. 4:51, he's located at a parking pullout near the Daybell residence. This is generally around the time that Tammy was assaulted. And by 5:16, he's back at his townhouse. And more than likely, he was being hollered at by Lori, hollered down the line from wherever she was at screwing this up, having the gun jam, not knowing how to work the gun with the thing he's added to it in order to keep things silent. At 7:15 to 10:30, Alex used the track phone that he had bought the day previous and communicated 10 times with Chad Daybell. Sadly, the messages could not be retrieved, but if that isn't another smoking gun. So Chad has to talk to him for over 3 hours about what went wrong, what possibly went wrong, what possibly she saw, what Tammy was saying. Let's look at it from Tammy's viewpoint. Tammy emailed Garth right after the attempted shooting. I think I was a bit in shock because I said, "What do you think you're doing?" I realized it was a paintball gun with a hopper on it. Really wasn't, Tammy, but you got lucky. He pulled the trigger while pointing the gun at me. I was more annoyed than scared at that point. He was standing between me and the door. He didn't say anything or move towards me. The thought crossed my mind to hit him with my clogging shoes, but I called Chad. He ran off. And I put note, I wish Tammy had just brained Alex with her clogs. This is from the files. Fremont County. Chad Daybell, 51 years old, was married to Tammy Daybell, 49 years old. October 9th, a male suspect dressed in all black clothing with a ski mask pointed a gun at Tammy and pulled the trigger multiple times before he ran away. No projectiles fired out of the weapon. Despite law enforcement efforts, the suspect was unable to be located. Evidence gathered and processed identified Chad as the facilitator of the crime and Alex as the shooter. Now, in a conspiracy, you tend to just need a common scheme or plan, kind of like a meeting of the minds, and one overt act. Not everybody has to be involved in every overt act. Here, there were so many overt acts. For example, regarding Tammy's death and the attempted murder, Alex goes to the gun range. Chad is also seen at the storage unit as Alex gets those guns out. Alex is at Sportsman's Warehouse gearing up to shoot Tammy. Alex is scoping the Daybell property that Cass data has him pinging there. Alex laying in wait at the church near Chad's home. Okay? Also him prepping in the cold and shooting through a Dodge Dakota Daybell car. And how to make it a suppressor and all this stuff and the previous shooting of her. And then when she finally does end up murdered, it's not a mystery. It truly isn't. Once the cast data puts everything together, it's really obvious. At this point in the story, Chad wants to be with Lori. And he cannot fund her lavish lifestyle. Tammy Daybell, as the school librarian, was the breadwinner, not Chad. He had already declared bankruptcy with the book company. And so to keep it going with Lori, he would need money. And according to his finances, the Daybell family made $30,000 a year. I mean, with 5 kids. I mean, he still had kids. And Lori at this point did not get the payout she was thinking she was going to get. So this changed things. And he wanted to be with Lori. And he couldn't fund that lifestyle. Even back in July, you can see texts to this effect. He was talking about going to a movie that has Hawaiian scenery. Lori to Chad says, "I love you. You will enjoy the scenery. It looks like Hawaii." And he says, "Hopefully we will be there together soon." And he says, "That is the plan." That's the plan. His wife was alive in July. They had a plan. Chad Daybell told David Warwick that Tammy was a good wife. What was this good wife work? The Primerica policy was worth $300,000 with Chad as the beneficiary. The Life Map policy from the school was up to $130,000 with Chad as the beneficiary. The total life insurance payout amount of this good woman was $430,000 to Chad as the beneficiary. At Lori Vallow's trial, many witnesses testified that Tammy seemed fit. She was clogging. She was getting ready to run a race. She wasn't complaining of ailments. There weren't problems with her health, like Chad said. That wasn't backed up by the witnesses at Lori Vallow's trial. And on the night Tammy died, her phone was active and playing games until 10:22 p.m. Then a JPEG was deleted from her phone at 11:28 p.m. It's not known what that was a picture of at 11:28 p.m. On October 19th, Chad called 911 to report that his wife, Tammy, fell out of bed and was deceased. No physical trauma was observed on her and no autopsy was completed. Garth told, I think it was 48 hours, that he found his mother lying half on the bed and half on the floor. And he said, I just ran over and I picked her up and I put her back on the bed. And I said to my dad, I think she's dead. And his sister said, it was just so heartbreaking. It seemed so unfathomable that it could even happen. Right. Unfathomable because she was not sick. That's my opinion. Anyway, Garth said, my dad was just pacing back and forth, just saying, why? How could this happen? Pointing at the pictures on the wall. She can't be dead. Like, how could this be? What do we do? The Daybell children did a sit-down interview with 48 Hours. Garth said, I heard a thump, and I heard my dad yell, Garth, Garth, come quick. His mother was lying half on the bed, half off the bed. I put her back on the bed, and I said to Dad, I think she's dead. In my opinion, this was manufactured so that Garth could be maybe one of the first outcry witnesses. In my opinion, this was performative for the family, with Chad pointing, how can this happen? And pointing at the walls and pointing at her pictures, because he's been allegedly for years telling people that he thought she would die early. And for days running up to this, talking about how she's so unwell. And there's, Viola that speared in her. And all of a sudden he's shocked and can't believe it. It's all performative. And the Daybell family declined an autopsy. The kids were really emphatic that it wasn't Chad's decision, that they made the decision. It really doesn't matter. He had them hoodwinked, and he might still have them hoodwinked, in my opinion. Samantha Gwilliam, Tammy Daybell's sister, testified at Lori's trial that Chad called her the next morning, and he said that Tammy had been really sick, coughing all night, and had a coughing fit around midnight, went back to sleep, and, quote, rolled out of bed dead. Note, the dead don't roll. The neighbor, Todd Gilbert, testified at Lori Vallow's trial that Chad told him about Tammy's death. Quote, he said she died about 2:30, would have been a.m., I'm sorry for the typo, and when she fell out of bed, he called for Garth to help him put her back in the bed. Oh, Lord. Now listen. If somebody you feel they're unconscious, you don't put them in the bed. You put them on the floor to do CPR. Does he not know this? Did he not care? At Lori Vallow's trial, there's many messages shown telling her of Tammy's death, and she always expresses renewed surprise at it. Here's an example from an unknown person at 9:18. I'm not sure if you heard, but Chad's wife died last night. And Lori responded at 9:33, oh my gosh, I did not hear that. I'm in Hawaii and it's 6 a.m. Remember I told you she always gets out of Dodge? Lori continued at 9:34, do you know what happened? And the unknown person said, yes, she woke in the night coughing, threw up, collapsed, and passed away. So Nicole was the one that informed her in this case. This is Tammy's obituary, and it notes how she passed away peacefully in her sleep on Saturday, October 19th. She will later be exhumed, and then there will be a different story. At Lori's trial, many witnesses testified about Chad's demeanor at the funeral, before the funeral, after the funeral, how he didn't seem really sad about his wife's passing, about how he was really eager to get rid of her things, about how he was eager to get out of the house and live elsewhere, and that it was very surprising to people. And the day after Tammy died, Chad texted to Lori, I'm feeling sad, but it isn't for the reason everyone thinks. It wasn't because his wife was dead, it was because he wasn't yet up in Lori's arms. Chad Daybell's neighbor, Alice Gilbert, testified at Lori's trial about Chad's demeanor right after Tammy's funeral. Like that day, she took over a meal to the Daybell residence. after the funeral and the kids were starting to eat the food, and Chad announced that he was moving out with a friend who had a condo. Chad then told the kids to go through Tammy's things that same afternoon. Note, that's callous, that's cold, and that's uncaring. And on the day that Tammy is buried, Lori is searching for wedding dresses. She's getting ready to marry Chad Daybell. Samantha Gwilliam, Tammy's sister, testified at Lori's trial that upon hearing of Chad Daybell's remarriage, quote, "You don't get married 4 weeks after you just buried your wife of almost 30 years. You just don't do that," end quote. When she found out that he married Lori only 2 weeks later, she was devastated. She said she Googled Lori Vallow and saw Charles Vallow's obituary and a mention of a JJ left by Kay Woodcock. And she said to Chad, quote, "Please tell me about this woman you replaced my sister with," end quote. And Chad told her there were no children and that they were going to be empty nesters. All lies and, in my opinion, consciousness of guilt. He could not have his ex-sister-in-law snooping around about these missing, soon-to-be obvious missing children. I am putting this out of order of the chronology, the timeline, but Tammy ends up being exhumed. And then the examiner found that she had bruises on her right and left arm and chest, bruises caused within hours or minutes of death, consistent with someone being restrained, and the cause of death was consistent with asphyxia, because Tammy had 6 bruises on her front and 4 bruises on her back, and they were fresh bruises stopped at the hemorrhage stage, which means that it stops when her heart circulation ceased. And there was also no inflammatory response, meaning her body didn't even have time to send out those things that help stop inflammation. In the Lori Vallow Daybell trial, the chief medical examiner, Dr. Eric Christensen, said during the autopsy for Tammy Daybell that bruises were discovered and likely occurred at the time she died. He said the bruises were consistent with someone being restrained and support the finding that her cause was death from asphyxia, being deprived of oxygen. The bruises were found on her arms and chest, and photos of the bruises of her body were shown to jurors, while marks of the bruises on a figure were shown publicly in the courtroom. Christensen said the bruises were from acute injuries that occurred most likely prior to her death. The state argued in Lori's case against Tammy that Wood said that the medical examiner found nothing in her that would have killed her, like naturally. She had bruises on her arms and she had been asphyxiated. And so 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori get married, and they're seen in their wedding pictures dancing and having the most wonderful time without a care in the world, seemingly. There's no sign of JJ. There's no sign of Ty Lee. And when son Colby tries to text Ty Lee, he says, in retrospect, the messages didn't seem to be coming from her, but he still got his regular Venmo payments. If the Daybell children were upset, we don't know about it. They seemingly were kept sweet by a trip to Disneyland that turned into a trip to Knott's Berry Farm instead. I don't know why Chad cheaped out. I don't know why. Maybe Disneyland was too expensive for that size of a group. In life, there's always the hero of the piece, and the hero of this piece is Kay Woodcock. Kay and Larry Woodcock were always fighting to see their grandson JJ, and they kept after Lori, and then when she ceased to respond to them, they proceeded with all the different detectives and the different agencies. First, trying to get them to look at Charles's murder, and then trying to get a welfare check on JJ. And this is what uncovered this whole entire murderous spree. Although the couple couldn't afford Disneyland, apparently they went back to Hawaii, and Colby was starting to question Ty Lee's not calling him back. On November 22nd, Colby received a text from Lori after he asked her about it. I texted Ty to send it, but I haven't heard back yet. That was about the Venmo. So if he wasn't kept sweet with the Venmo payments on time, he would ask. And then she said, hope you got the Venmo. Ty said she sent it late. I'll call you when I get a break. But he wasn't hearing from his sister. He said he, in retrospect, believed that they weren't texts from her at all and that he had suspected as much, but he didn't call the authorities. And then November 26, 2019, the crap hits the fan. Detective Hermosillo testified at Lori Vallow's trial that he and Detective Hope performed a welfare check for J.J. Vallow on November 26th. He said that Alex Cox was there with Chad outside, and he told Alex Cox that they were doing a welfare check for JJ, and that Alex gave him a blank look, then looked over at Chad Daybell. Hermosillo later stopped Chad leaving in a Chevy Equinox and asked him when was the last time you saw JJ, and that Chad said October 2019 in apartment 107. And Chad told Hermosillo that he hardly knew Lori and that they'd only met a couple of times. Now, at this point, you have to understand Kay Woodcock has informed many different detectives about different parts of this story. Hermosillo knew that Lori and Chad were married. At this point, he knew that Chad was lying to him. Now, this inures bad to Chad. You are not supposed to lie to the police officers. It's consciousness of guilt. Okay, that's in my opinion. This is consciousness of guilt, because when Hermosillo lays on him, I mean, figuratively, Chad eventually reveals that, yeah, he knew Lori Vallow and he knew her phone number. And then when he said, Hermosillo asked, well, why didn't you offer that up when I asked you? Chad says, well, it feels like you're accusing me of something. And in my opinion, all of this is just consciousness of guilt. They weren't expecting someone to show up for a welfare check, and they didn't know what to say, and they didn't know how to handle it, and so they lied. And then they literally packed up and left overnight. They literally ran. Melanie Gibb testified at Lori Vallow's trial that around Thanksgiving of 2019, she received a telephone call from Chad, and she said he sounded nervous, and he told her that the police would be calling her and to not pick up the phone. It was about JJ, and she said she asked him, isn't JJ with Kay? And that Chad replied, no, he's not. That implies to me that he has some kind of knowledge about where JJ is. And then Melanie also testified at Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing and Lori Vallow's trial that Chad told her not to pick up the phone, and that later Lori called her and asked her to lie and say the police was with her in Arizona seeing Frozen. And Rob Wood said, how did that make you feel? And Melanie Gibb said, I had a really bad feeling in my stomach. I felt very shaken up by it. And at first, Gibb wasn't forthcoming to the police, but 12 days later, she made a call to Lori and Chad and secretly recorded it. On a side note, in a conspiracy, you can opt out of the conspiracy, and one of those ways is by going to the police. So if she had been a part of the conspiracy, one of the ways to get out of it was this act right here. So David Warwick did her a solid by suggesting she tape the recording between them. So Officer Pilar has called Melanie Gibb. She lies to him saying, yeah, I had JJ, but I don't have him anymore. And she doesn't clear this up until December 6th. So the police go ahead and get a search warrant for the townhomes. But meanwhile, they're going to lam it. They are literally going to go on the lam. On November 26th, Lori and Alex are seen packing up a truck and heading towards Hawaii. Lori and Chad fly to Hawaii. On November 27th, Rexburg Police Department help Arizona execute a search warrant regarding JJ's welfare. Seemingly, they're not even worried about Tylee at this point, and the FBI was contacted also to assist in the search. The FBI raided Lori's apartment at 175 and found all the clothing removed and just some remaining furniture. They also raided Melanie Pulowski's apartment at 174. And they raided Alex Cox's apartment at 107 and noted that there was nothing inside of it, and they failed to find the children. And since anything out in the open is fair game, they saw a rental agreement and then they got a search warrant for the storage unit, which then yielded video of them moving those tires, of them moving the seat of Tylee's Jeep, of them putting the kids' stuff in it with no kids. It's sad. At this point, like I said, Chad and Lori are on the lam, and the other members of the firstborn are pairing up and getting married. Allegedly, the end times were to occur July 2020, and the couplings were necessary for that. On November 29th, Alex Cox marries Zulema in Las Vegas in a 3.5-minute ceremony. There were no guests, and the security guard was the witness. Alex also changes his last name to Pastenes, and the minister noted that it was a first for him, the first time a man was taking his wife's surname out of 100,000 weddings. As you can see here, Zulema Pastenes of Gilbert, Arizona, born redacted, and Alexander Lamar Cox of Santan Valley, Arizona, who wishes to use the name Alexander Lamar Pastenes after marriage. I think this was his attempt to go incognito. Conveniently, on the next day, Melanie Boudreau marries Ian Pulowski in Las Vegas with Uncle Alex as the witness. Ian seemingly doesn't know what he got himself into, and in my opinion, he's also a reason why Melanie is not a part of the conspiracy as of now, because he essentially started working with the police. So canceling the conspiracy. This is in my opinion. He saved her. And this is just my opinion. I'm allowed to have it, but both of her husbands saved her from murder charges. But because looking at her trying to get her children with Alex and out there like a spider and seeing those body cam videos, I don't think those children would have had a good fate being labeled as dark as they were by the other members of the group, whether she liked it or not. And also, with Ian cooperating with the police the way he did, I think he saved her, and I think she should be grateful. So on December 2nd and 3rd, Ian Pulowski's ex calls Ian's mother, worried that Ian may be in a cult. His ex was worried about how to keep her children safe, and so Ian went to the police. Ian allegedly said that it was possible that Chad, Lori, and Alex planned the Brandon Boudreau shooting, and that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger. He was unaware at this point that they were buried in Chad's backyard, and that Alex and Zulema were preparing earthquakes. Law enforcement interviewed Melanie Pulowski for 5 hours, and she tells Ian later that 2 of the agents were possessed by evil spirits. I don't think she was too impressed by his aid. The next day, December 4th, Ian Pulowski attempts to cooperate with law enforcement, and he tells his ex-wife regarding Brandon's attempted murder that Melanie didn't know beforehand what was going to happen, and that they made the attempt, failed, and told her about it after the fact. That's having to do with the shooting on Brandon Boudreau. On December 6, 2019, the Rexburg Police Department was contacted by Melanie Gibb, and she finally admits to them that both Chad and Lori asked her to lie and tell the police that she had JJ, but she never had JJ. So she admits to this, and they start to firm up the timeline of when JJ was last seen. On December 8th, 2019, Melanie Gibb calls and tapes Chad and Lori surreptitiously. It's a cover your ass call, in my opinion. Melanie Gibb came forward when she felt like she was being set up, and she asks things like, "Where are you guys? Is JJ safe?" And the answer is, "He's safe and happy." And Melanie Gibb says that both Alex and Zulema had told her, "You don't want to know what happened to JJ." So there's knowledge there, and that he will never be found. It's a very damning tape. Essentially, Lori is saying she's not telling anyone where JJ is to give them plausible deniability. And in the call, Chad stated, quote, "If you knew where JJ was, that puts you in danger." This implies he knew where JJ was, and it was dangerous. Additionally, Chad said that he had known for years that Tammy would die at a young age, and that his life would have, quote unquote, 2 segments. It's a damning call. It's consciousness of guilt. It is not good. Not good for you, Chad. I think this is a good stopping point for part 3. Part 4 will be the final wrap up in this episode until Chad's actual trial. I love this picture of Nate Eaton yapping at their heels while they're on the lam, and it just goes to show their demeanor, how they just seemingly did not care that her children were missing. It's just stunning. It really is. So, if you're interested, if you like this video, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. You'll be notified of the next time I upload. And without further ado, have an excellent day. Bye.